They did not scream to scare the enemy. They screamed because something inside them had already snapped. Across the north, stories spread of warriors who felt no pain. Men who charged alone into shield walls. Men who bit their shields, stared through blood, and kept walking. They were called Berserkers. But here is the problem. Almost everything we think we know about them comes from fear, rumor, and enemies trying to explain the unexplainable. So who were they really? Were they madmen, religious warriors, or something far more unsettling? Ordinary men pushed past a point they could never return from. If berserkers truly existed, their power came at a cost. And the people who feared them most were not always their enemies. Sometimes it was their own people. Imagine a cold morning before battle, the kind of silence that presses on your ears. Weapons rest against shields. Breath fogs the air. Among the warriors stands a man who does not speak. He does not joke. He does not pray loudly. He stares at nothing. Others avoid his eyes. This man has chosen a path few dare to walk, not because it promises glory, but because once you step onto it, there is no easy way back. Berserkers were not random fighters. They were often separated from the rest, watched closely, used carefully, because when the moment came, they were unleashed, not commanded. Before battle, something changed in them. Sources describe shaking, grinding teeth, a sudden heat in the body, even in freezing air. Not magic, not monsters. A mind preparing to break its own limits. Fear is what keeps a man alive. Fear tells you when to stop. A berserker learned to silence that voice. How they did it is still debated. Some believe it was ritual, isolation, rhythmic breathing, chants that narrowed the world to a single point. Others believe it was exhaustion, hunger, cold, pain used deliberately, again and again, until the body stopped reacting normally. Whatever the method, the result was the same. When the signal came, the man you knew disappeared. What remained was movement. Forward, always forward. Picture the clash. Shields strike, spears break, men fall. In the chaos, a berserker does not fight like the others. He does not retreat to reform. He does not wait for orders. He pushes into the enemy line, alone, or with one or two like him. Not reckless, relentless. Wounds that would stop another man barely slow him. Not because he cannot feel pain, but because pain has lost its meaning. To the enemy, this is terrifying. You stab him. He keeps coming. You cut him. He does not fall. You see his eyes wide and distant, as if you are not even there. And fear spreads faster than blood. This is why berserkers became legends, not because they were unbeatable, but because they broke the enemy's nerve. Yet here is the part the legends rarely tell. A berserker did not choose when to stop. Once the rage took hold, it was not easily turned off. He could strike friend or foe if they stood too close. He could chase fleeing enemies long after the battle was decided. There are quiet stories of warriors being restrained by their own allies, of trusted men stepping carefully, weapons lowered, voices calm, not to praise him, but to survive him. When the battle ended, the cost arrived. The body collapsed. Hours of shaking, uncontrollable cold, weakness so deep the man could barely stand. Sometimes it took days to recover. Sometimes he never fully did. Because each time a man crossed that line, it became easier to cross again, and harder to return. Some berserkers were valued, kept close to kings, rewarded with status and gifts. Others were feared even in peace. Imagine living beside a man who could not always control his own violence. A man whose anger could ignite without warning. A man whose greatest strength only existed when something inside him was breaking. Communities are built on trust. Berserkers strained that trust. There are accounts of them being outlawed, banished, killed quietly after they became too dangerous, not because they were evil, but because they were unstable. And here lies the darkest truth. Berserkers were not born different. They were shaped by war, by belief, by the expectation that a man's worth was proven only when he was willing to lose himself completely. In a world where survival depended on strength, someone had to go first. Someone had to absorb the terror. Someone had to break, so others would not have to. So the berserker stepped forward, again and again, until there was nothing left to step back to. Think about what happens after the stories end. No songs are sung about the shaking hands. No carvings show the empty stare by the fire, long after the battle. A man who lives too long as a berserker often struggles to live as anything else. Peace feels wrong. Silence feels heavy. The body waits for a battle that may never come. Some sought danger constantly. Some became violent without cause. Some disappeared into the wilderness, away from people they might hurt. And others died young. Not in battle, but from the toll taken by a life lived at the edge of the human limit. The Viking world valued courage, but it also understood balance. A man who could not control himself was a liability, no matter how brave he once was. This is why berserkers fade from the records, not in a single moment, but gradually, as warfare changed, as communities demanded order over chaos, as the cost became too high. They were never replaced. Because what they represented was not a technique, it was a sacrifice. So when we picture berserkers as unstoppable warriors, we miss the real story. They were not fearless. They were men who learned to live without fear's protection. And that raises a final question. If you could become unstoppable for a moment, but lose pieces of yourself every time you did, how many battles would it take before there was nothing left worth coming back for?